Hi everyone, we just saw a video about numbers in Python. Next we're going to turn to another really important data type that we use in Python all the time, and that's called string. And what we will learn is that we can specify a string in Python by using either single or double quotes. So just by using that syntax, we indicate the data type. So here I am setting a string equal to letter S. So I'm assigning variable s to contain the value, which is the word string, and I'm using single quotes. And I'm also going to do a type function. So I'm going to just check what is the type of this variable s, and what comes back to me is str, string. So here's some things that can go wrong. If I do this, if I don't have matching quotation marks, I'll get an error. So I just have to make sure the types of quotation marks that I use match, right? Doesn't matter which one they are, they just have to match. Some other things that we could see, one would be just forgetting the quotation marks, and that is not a recognized data type in Python. We have to use the appropriate syntax in order to specify a string. So let's get this back. There we go. Okay. So now I'm going to create a somewhat longer string. We are learning Python, and this is just to show you that I can use either single or double quotes, and I can print the variable w, and then what comes back to me is just an image of that string itself. Okay. Right now, indexing strings. This is the really important part here. And indexing is something we use not just with strings, but we will learn about it in this context. So each character in a string is associated with an index, and we can imagine that each character in the string lives in a sort of a box, and that box has a number on it, and those numbers are the indices used to identify the characters in the string. So if I make this visual, I can see that the indices go in order, starting with 0. That's really important to note, right? Not every programming language is the same, but in Python, the indices start with 0, and then we go all the way up to the last character in the string. So notice that I also have indices for the spaces, okay? So the first space in this string is at index 2. We can ask questions like, what is in box 0? And in Python syntax, this looks something like this. So I have to indicate what string I'm referring to. So remember, I gave that variable name w. And then we use brackets. So whenever I use brackets, I'm indicating an index. So this is kind of just like asking that question, what character lives in box 0 or in index 0? I can also ask, what character lives in box or index 21? That's the last character in the string. So let's actually try that out. So here's our string again. I like to just define it in every little code block that I have, so that I don't overwrite anything by accident. So I have w equals, we are learning Python. I ask print w at index 0, and I get a w. Right? If I do 1, I would get an E. If I do index 2, I would get a space, so I get nothing there. So let's put that back to 0. Oops. I always do a lot of Control Z or Command Z to undo things that I write erroneously in my code. So that's useful. Let's take a look at index 21, and there we get the last character in this string, which is letter N. So of course we want to see what happens if we make a mistake and accidentally count the letters and the characters in the string wrong and assume that there are 22 of them. Well, we're going to get an error. And the error looks like this: string index out of range. So I've tried to look for a character beyond the range of indices of the string. So there's nothing at index 22. So I get that error. So as you might imagine, there are times when we might want to know what is the last character in a string. And it's not convenient to know to have to know how many characters are in the string. So we need a better way to do that. All right, so we can do that by using the len function. The len function gives us the length of a string. So remembering that the indices in a string start at 0, the length of our string would be 22. But I want the index of the last character in the string, and to get that I can always use length of the string minus 1. All right, so that gives me n, and let me just prove that to you. Okay, let's just do a little more here. Okay, so what is len w minus 1? Let's just try that out. It's always good practice to break apart the code that I share with you to make sure you understand. So this should give me 21, right? And if I just do length of string w, I get 22. So if I were to do something like this, I'm going to get that string index out of range, so I don't want to do that. So I want to make sure that I do the minus 1 in here to get the correct result. And I know you do have to train your eyes a little bit here to keep track of where all of the parentheses are, right? So length of w minus 1 is the value 22 minus 1, so that number should be contained within the square brackets. And then, we want to specify the variable that holds the string. So w and then open close brackets. Inside the brackets we are doing length of w minus 1. Okay, so that's how we can do that. There's also another way to find the last character in the string, which is even more efficient. And that's just to use the index minus 1. So we can go from the last character in the string and subtract indices. And I encourage you to try to experiment with this a little bit more. So notice that this gives us the n. Try adding a code block and just seeing, okay, well, does that work if I also do n or w at index minus 2? Would I get an O? Yes, I do. So now we can convince ourselves even more. There I get the H. So I can move backwards in indices from the end and then moving towards the beginning of the string. Okay, so I'm going to show you, I like to show you the things we can do and also the things we can't do. So with any object in Python, we have methods that we can use with that type of data and then methods that we can't. So indexing is actually a method that works for strings but not for some other data types, like numbers, for example. So I'll show you if we try defining a number 435 and let's just do len of 435 and see what kind of error we get. Okay, so Python recognized that 435 is a number, an integer to be precise, and the type of error that we see is object of type int has no len, meaning this len method does not work with numbers. So I can't index numbers, I can't find the length of numbers using this method. So we will have to discover other methods that we can use to do that with numbers. So before we look for more efficient methods to do this, let's see, as a small exercise, if we could figure out how to change a number into a string and a string into a number in Python, because maybe we can do those conversions and accomplish some tasks that we couldn't do otherwise. Okay, so let's just search. Let's see, turn string into int Python, right? Convert a string into integer in Python, we can use the int function. Okay, and let's try turn integer into a string in Python. Okay, so there's an str function. I don't even need to click into these pages to find out those methods. Okay, so let's just give that a try. Let's say q equals 435, and I want to do, let's choose a new letter here, y equals str q, and then let's check our types. Type of q, and I'm going to have to print that, print type of variable q, and then let's print type of variable y to prove that I have converted. You know what, I also want to do this. I want to print q, and I want to print the type of q, and then I want to print y and the type. So let's see if we get something. Okay, so I can see what the number looks like, and in line 3 what I'm getting is 435 with a class of integer. After using the str function and resetting that equal to variable y, I now have something that looks the same. When I print y, it looks exactly the same, but the variable type has changed. Okay. Oh, I guess I was supposed to do, yeah, oh yeah, so now let's try going in the other direction. So if I define r equals 435, and then I'll print r, and then I'll print the type of r. All right, let's just run that and see what we get. Okay, it's a string. Okay, now let's try using t equals int. That's our new method that I looked up. And then I'm going to convert the string r into integer t, call it t, and then I'll check it out. Let's do print t and type of t. And we get an integer. Okay, so that's great. We can go back and forth between those two variable types. Now that's going to be useful because we're going to try out a challenge problem. All right, I also added some text here to say if you do this and follow along with me and try this exercise, take note of where you found your answer, right? Stack Overflow. I know I didn't click into any of those pages, but I imagine Stack Overflow is right there. So this is a great chance for me to introduce Stack Overflow to you. This is where programmers ask their questions and answer other programmers' questions. And you can see threads that show some examples and explanations to address questions that people post. And this is really, really nice. And you can see that this answer received 2,175 upvotes, so it is the dominant solution on the page. And you will become very comfortable with Stack Overflow. There are some programmers who will say that they have taught themselves almost everything they know just by reading Stack Overflow. You can do that. It's probably not the most efficient way to learn, but if you really need to know something, and I've done this myself, you can dig in and find solutions and really learn a lot that way. Okay, here's our challenge problem. We're going to employ the tools that we just used in an effort to add up the digits of the number 435 using indexing. Okay, so I know I could just add 4 plus 3 plus 5 and of course get the answer that way. But let's just imagine I have a much bigger number and I can't do it in my head. So I'm going to try to use indexing to do it. So the first thing I'll do is I'll say s equals str of n. And I'll just make sure that worked. Okay, so now it's a string, which means I can now index, and I can do s at index 0 I'll just make sure that I'm getting a 4 when I do that. Okay, S at index 0. What happens if I do this? This is the wrong way to solve the problem, but let's just try so I can show you what happens when we add strings, right? Because these are strings, so I'm not actually doing mathematical addition, and this is a little weird because the answer we can see should be 4 plus 3, which is 7, plus 5, which is 12. But if I do this, I actually just concatenate the digits and mash them back together so that I get the 435 back. But that's string addition. I want to do actual mathematical addition. So instead of doing that, I'm going to need to do int. I'm going to need to wrap, and we use the term wrap. I'm going to wrap each of these strings, that's what they are, with the int function that we just explored in the exercise above, and that should give me 12. Let's call it result. So anytime I'm doing a lot of operations, I want to just give it a variable name, and I can call it or print it. So I'll say, okay, the result is 12. Okay, that's good. The type of result should be an integer. Okay, if I type that wrong, I would get an error. So here we go. It is an integer. Okay, and remember, I'm only getting the output for line 6 because I didn't print. If I want to see everything, I have to wrap print statements around all of it, and that way I would get the output from line 5 and the output from line 6. And notice the output just looks a little bit different when I use a print statement, and that's just a feature of Python. Okay, so that's an exercise using the str function and the int method. In the next lesson, we're going to learn some more efficient techniques for doing things like this. We're going to learn about slicing and stepping through strings.